Chapter 5. World of Mirrors Breathing. A sleeping Tsukasa rests under the blankets of his room within the Hikari studio while wearing his magenta-colored, elegant styling pajamas. The benefits of renting a room would be the private bathroom. Now he said he doesn't mind it, but Natsumi was immediately against the idea, mentioning something about pervert. Still, it worked out for him in the least. Tsukasa breathes calmly, finally awaking. He opens his eyes looking rather happy, to quickly become a face of disdain as he's locked to lock with Dragonic, smiling way too happy while showing his dragon fangs. Morning. The purple dragon speaks softly, almost in a creepy way. Tsukasa, his face stunned out of sheer discomfort, just stares in absolute silence. Single quote, ellipsis, single quote. Dragonic just smiles, his snorts blowing gently. Tsukasa slowly turns around, sliding his head underneath his pillow. 5 more minutes. He just utters, hoping this is a nightmare. Dragonic smirks and grabs onto the sheets. Nope, shower, the dragon shouts, tossing not just the sheets off the bed but even Tsukasa with a mighty pull, slammed onto the wall, followed by a yell. Wah! Dragonic sweat drops a bit that he overdid it. After taking painkiller pills and doing his business, including looking handsome, Tsukasa walks downstairs, at first regularly dressed in a pink shirt, it's magenta in his opinion, open sleeveless black vest and pants with shoes, before he's altered into a lawyer-like business outfit with his camera still intact. He didn't notice it, just thinking how disturbing that dragon is sometimes. Yusuke, eating breakfast with Dragonic, spots him and blinks awkwardly while asking, puzzled, Tsukasa, what are you wearing? Tsukasa raises an eyebrow, looking down, and notices his clothes have changed again. He looks at a mirror and hums, rather impressed, a bit but impressed. I'm a lawyer, it seems, he states, adjusting his tie. He turns to face the purple dragon and asks with an annoyed face, not forgetting that little wake-up call. Let me guess. New world exploring time? Dragonic grins, ignoring what happened, instead proudly declares, waving his arm to the backdrop now showing the image of a massive, mecha-like red serpent dragon. Welcome to the AR world of Ryuki. Tsukasa hums, figuring as much by the mirror monster that's supposed to be the creature Ryuki is based on, as he grabs a piece of toast while sitting down. A world that is, well, honestly, I like this world over the real world of Ryuki. Dragonic, slightly hesitating, expresses knowing well what the real version of that world is, and well, it's less depressing than engaging. Single quote, ellipsis. Intriguing. Tsukasa just comments with a bored expression, eating his toast. He chews, eyeing Yusuke, and then Absol eats dog food that Natsumi bought in the last world, but no Natsumi. Where's Natsumi-kan? He asks, wondering where she was. Absol lifts up her head and runs to his side. Absol, she barks at Tsukasa, who eyes her. He nods, actually understanding her to Yusuke's confusion. Someone called her and she went to ask question about this world? Tsukasa translates literally what Absol said back, to whom she nods. Tsukasa hums again, nodding seemingly relaxed, until he turns to Dragonic and questions, astonished. How am I now able to understand her one name barking? Dragonic, resuming eating his rice with egg and bread with chopsticks, just answers after swallowing. Deca driver. Tsukasa makes a face and just shrugs it off, able to understand that. Makes sense since he can understand Grongi. Single quote, ellipsis. He begins to ask if he will be able to understand any other of Absol's fellow Pokemon creatures, and Dragonic just nods while eating. Tsukasa hums again, taking a bite of his toast, and admits it while chewing it. Handy. Dragonic smirks, agreeing. Glad that Natsumi's grandfather was able to add that feature as well as a few others. Tsukasa has been thinking about that and asks the dragon about him. How much did you know about her grandfather? The dragon eyes him, thinking about the question, and answers with a small smile. Recalling the chats they had about the building progress of the Deca driver with a cup of coffee. He loved his coffee and his photos. Tsukasa scoffs with a small smirk. Already imagining it from the coffee he had made by the granddaughter. Wait, Natsumi's grandfather made the belt? Yusuke, more focused on his breakfast, suddenly burst out loudly. Dragonic makes a face, as does Absol, at how clueless he is. Tsukasa pulls out the decadriver and nods, not able to deny this thing helped save Natsumi the first time he transformed. He eyes the device, wondering how Natsumi's grandfather was able to build this thing. He was convinced Natsumi wouldn't have a clue, so Dragonic is his only lead. Eijiro, at least the one in this reality, did. He wanted to create a rider that he dreamed of, one with the power and potential to maintain order. Dragonic begins to inform Yusuke about Natsumi's grandfather and his skills in photography as well as his science to have created the decadriver. And the hero nonsense Natsumi speaks about? Tsukasa then asks never to be a fan of that last bit. Dragonic nods, stating, that too. He believed that the good guys will always win, no matter what the outcome. Tsukasa just scoffs at such nonsense. Good guys? What is that really? If that was true, then he wouldn't be referred to as a destroyer, a disaster, or a devil. He stands up from the chair after drinking up the mediocre coffee and declares, going to take a walk then and figure out this world's problem. Absol barks, wanting to come along too. Tsukasa smirks, kneeling down, and he taunts the dog Mon while petting her head. Need to release your nasty junk down there? Absol makes a face, blushing or embarrassed. She soon growls and barks, biting into Tsukasa's closest leg. Absol, Tsukasa, making a stunned yet agonist expression, quickly shakes off the white-furred dog Pokemon gripping her fangs in his leg. He finally pulls the dog off his leg, grunting as he rubs his leg. I'll take that a damn yes. Tsukasa mutters angrily, gazing at the dog. Absol barks, smiling. Dragonic forms a smile, liking how well those two get along. After wrapping a few bandages on his leg, again, Tsukasa walks around in this new world wondering what his mission here will be this time. Seems whatever his task in a new AR world will be, it connects on his appearance and what role he takes on this world. Wonder what being a lawyer means. Hey, Tsukasa. He stops, turning to see Yusuke catching up to him, as did Dragonic and Absol. Yusuke pants, meaning to ask Tsukasa something since he's met him. How much do you know about Natsumi-chan? Tsukasa looks away from his question. He's not the type to ask Natsumi about her past or how she ended up with her parents dead. In a way, that's why he liked her company past those annoying pressure point attack whatever, and he then stops thinking and looks up at the large television screen and widens his eyes a bit. I mean, I haven't asked because, well, it could be a touchy subject, and Yusuke starts rambling on wanting to know more about Natsumi till Tsukasa smacks his hand on his chest. He startles and questions him, slightly annoyed. Hey, what was that for? Tsukasa points up to the large screen on the building and shows the television news report of Natsumi Hikari arrested for the death of a newspaper editor. Yusuke eyes it and drops his jaw, yelling out in horror. Natsumi-chan is arrested? Absol groans, worrying, while Dragonic growls, furious at how the hell this happened. Tsukasa, however, smirks before starting to laugh. The others eye him and just stare in surprise. Oh, the best irony, Tsukasa proclaims, finding all of this as the best humor he's seen. All the times of her lecturing him, of treating him like a child, or attacking him with a thumb laughing attack, this is all karma and it's glorious. Dragonic glares, telling him off, maddened with his arms crossed. Not a laughing matter, Tsukasa, she's being sentenced to death. Single quote ellipsis. Just a little bit funny then. Tsukasa says, smiling a bit. Absol barks angrily. He rolls his eyes and becomes serious, declaring, okay, fine, let's go save her. Yusuke sighs, thinking Tsukasa would leave Natsumi to die. Tsukasa adjusts his coat. Now to figure out what the hell Natsumi was doing to get her into this situation. You might find her in a police station. The group blinks, turning towards a voice saying. Tsukasa stares oddly surprised as it was a brown-haired violinist, playing a rather familiar song. He performs it with such calm, passionate, and talent. Dragonic hums smiling. Liking this tone as did Absol. Tsukasa walks up to the violinist and looks down, not seeing him having his case open in front of his feet. The young man just blinks confused as Tsukasa pulls out his wallet and stuffs a few yen from it into the stranger's pockets. I wasn't asking for money, the young man, staggered. Tries telling him but Tsukasa smirks, tapping his shoulder and responds. Sure you were, struggling violinist. You're out trying to get money. Good for you. Now get a job. The young man just makes a face, mouth slightly dropped as Tsukasa salutes and walks off to the police station as Yusuke asks him just as stunned. Seriously? Tsukasa? No response as Tsukasa continues walking. Natsumi groans, locked up in some prison even wearing prisoner's clothes and in cuffs. Why did this have to happen to her of all people? One moment she went to see this journalist lady and now she's being judged for her death. The officer told her that her lawyer is here to see her. Natsumi blinks. Questioning sitting in the private room. My lawyer? The officer steps out and now walking into the room is Tsukasa, waving at Natsumi with a salute. Yo, Tsukasa-kun! Natsumi screams out loudly, steaming angrily to see his smug smirk taunting her situation. She comes charging at him yelling at him. Is this your idea? Yusuke walks in sweat dropping. Oh calm down Natsumi-kan. Tsukasa tells her to calm down but Natsumi immediately sticks out her right thumb and goes to perform the laughing pressure point attack at him but Tsukasa this time had the advantage. Grabbing and pulling her cuffs downward and grips her hold. Natsumi startles trying to reach his neck but couldn't by the cuffs. Tsukasa smirks taunting her. What's wrong? Your laughing pressure point not working? Natsumi gets really fed up yelling out madly. So help me. Calm down Natsumi-chan. Yusuke tells her not wanting the officer to come in and stop their conversation. We still need to figure out why you're here. Natsumi scoffs. Puffing her cheeks angrily. Was this? She begins to ask if it was Tsukasa's doing but he wags his index finger as a no response and immediately declares pointing that same finger at her. I'm not that cruel Natsumi-kan. Natsumi groans, admitting he's not in framing someone for the death of another. So what happened? Tsukasa asks, sitting on the other side of the table. Lifting his feet up on the desk. Natsumi sighs sitting back on her chair and explains what had happened. Starting from the phone call she had this morning, I was called by this journalist lady about my opinions on the rider battles and I wanted to learn some things too. Last thing I knew when I arrived to see her, she dropped dead. I screamed for help and I was immediately the number one culprit of her murder. Tsukasa hums. Getting the gist of the situation and it's a grim one. From all angles, Natsumi is the only one who saw the death of this person. So you're the only person to witness her death? Yusuke asks. Still catching up, Natsumi frowns, nodding. Hearing enough, Tsukasa puts his feet on the ground and tells her while putting on fake lens glasses to look even more handsome yet serious. Okay Natsumi-kan, as your lawyer. I suggest we call for guilty and maybe they'll sentence you to 40 to 60 years in prison than the death penalty. Single quote ellipsis single quote. Natsumi is silent by what he said before bursting into a scream, begging. I don't want any of that. Yusuke panics, trying to calm her down. Relax. Tsukasa watches them freak out and smirks, adding. Maybe 80 years if we can't find clues. Natsumi starts crying out, rubbing her tearing eyes. Tsukasa eyes him rather annoyed but does find pity for her. Sighing. He takes himself seriously removing his glasses and declares. Relax Natsumi. We're getting you out of here. She startles, eyeing him with sobbing eyes and slowly says softly. Tsukasa-kun. Tsukasa gets up with a smirk, standing up, and vows to her. Leave it to me. After all, I'm your perfect lawyer. Natsumi forms a smile, believing his words. When he's like this, then she knows she's in good hands. Stay tight and don't go to the showers. Tsukasa declares, finger saluting as he walks out of the room. Natsumi's sweat drops heavily, as did Yusuke. Questioning unease. Why is he like that? Single quote ellipsis. That's his way to remain focused on a task. Smiling, Natsumi explains with a soft giggle. She recalls the first days she accepted Tsukasa to rent the empty room in the shop to live in. Well, it was chaotic at first, but she got used to it. I remember he said he would pay the bills and he arrived late, very late, saying he did them at the last second while he was goofing off. That's Tsukasa-kun's way, Natsumi expresses. Blushing a bit how ridiculous he is, but still responsible. She soon forms a frown, realizing it, eyeing Yusuke, and asks him, Yusuke-kun, look after him while I'm here. I just have this feeling this whole frame is towards Tsukasa. Yusuke blinks, asking her, what do you mean by that? Natsumi isn't sure why, just telling him. Just a feeling. Yusuke eyes her and nods, smiling, not planning to let Tsukasa do this alone. He soon bows and heads off. Natsumi sighs, hoping she's wrong, as Dragonic overhears the whole thing and agrees this all smells like a trap. He eyes Absol and pets her, ordering her to watch over Natsumi. Absol barks as Dragonic soon flies off to catch up to the two boys, going to save Natsumi and solve this mystery murder. The three arrive at the journalist building, and with Tsukasa access as Natsumi's lawyer, was able to enter the already examined conference room. So this is the place. Yusuke mutters, looking around as everything seems normal. Dragonic hums flying over the ceiling. Tsukasa examines every spot, finding nothing to show any marking of a struggle or kill. Stranger is no object that would have killed the editor as such. Natsumi being accused is absurd, meaning someone is pulling the strings to her being framed, and someone higher up too. Found something? Yusuke asks, not finding any clues. Tsukasa shakes his head in response. Not yet, Watson. Yusuke makes a face at Dragonic on what the heck is Watson. The dragon makes a disappointing expression to him for not knowing what the referring is about, just responding. I'm not explaining it. He sighs, sweat dropping. You're looking for clues too? Tsukasa stops, turning to face a young man who seems to be a photographer with the camera around his neck. He soon demands him while pointing at him. And you are? The young adult blinks before apologizing, sweat dropping, and greets them. Oh, sorry. I'm Shinji. I work under the editor that died. Reiko Momoi-san. Yusuke gladly greets him with a handshake while Tsukasa, humming, asks him, so you know the victim well? The young man Shinji nods, explaining it kindly. Reiko-san was a good person, always wanting to reveal the truth to everyone and do her best. He soon gets sad about the situation and expresses as such. It's not fair that she was killed, but I don't think that girl did it. Tsukasa raises an eyebrow and questions him. You never met my client. Shinji nods, admitting he hasn't, but he still doesn't think someone young that either he or his boss met would kill her out the bloom. I haven't, but I don't buy the idea someone like her would kill Reiko-san. He declares, certain that girl didn't commit the deed. He even adds, recalling that time of day. I actually pointed her to Reiko-san's office and I asked why she wanted to see her. It was to know about the writers. He pulls out a strange black rectangle deck box with the symbol of the kamen rider Ryuki. Yusuke is surprised while Tsukasa remains cool. And well, I just so happen to be one of them. Shinji reveals, rubbing his head. He's still new to the writer gig. Oh, so then you're trying to find the truth on your own. Tsukasa says, now getting what his aim is. Shinji nods, explaining his reasons. Hopefully, but I have to try. It's unjust for the innocent to be framed for crimes they didn't do. Even if the world is black. I want to try to be strong to righteous. Yusuke smiles, liking him. Dragonic nudges a bit on that ideal since nothing is truly black and white. Simple-minded goal, but whatever works with you. Tsukasa just responds almost uninterested. Shinji just smiles knowing that, but he still wants to try. I guess, but he begins to say until someone arrives to check the room. Shinji eyes the man and startles, muttering his name rather upset. Ren-san. Tsukasa. Yusuke and Dragonic watch as the two seem to know each other, talking about the editor who died. So they're former friends, huh? Tsukasa questions himself, even more curious. The three could tell there was tension between Shinji and Ren, almost like Shinji was betrayed by his once former comrade. They even discuss that Ren will fight in the rider battle to bring the suspect to justice for his own intentions. How are you not crushed by Reiko-san's? Shinji begins to say, upset, but Ren just tells him as he starts walking away. Shinji, if you wish to protect that girl accused for Momoi's death, then we will cross paths and fight. Shinji widens his eyes a bit as Ren leaves in a hurry. Ren-san. He calls him out, but no response from his former friend. Shinji lowers his eyes, upsetly. Yusuke frowns, wanting to stop Ren from leaving, but Tsukasa stops him, simply telling him, he made his choice, and so have I. Yield to these rider battles then? Yusuke asks, eyeing him. Tsukasa nods pretty confidently as he states, as Natsumi's lawyer, I can't say no. Shinji overhears this and tells him with a smile, Tsukasa, I wish you luck. Tsukasa scoffs at his wish and tells him, pointing his finger at him, luck is hardly what I'll need. Yusuke sweat drops, not sure about that. Tsukasa turns and raises an eyebrow as Ren didn't go far, talking to someone else rather mad. Who's that? He asks Shinji, who looks ahead and says a bit astonished. That's the sub-editor Kamada. He works on the articles in the rider battles. Tsukasa hums, getting closer. Listening to what Kamada said to Ren. So you didn't know she died alone in the conference room, Ren-san. Yet you're not here to talk though. Tsukasa narrows his eyes a bit by that statement. Ren then pulls out the Night Advent deck box. The older man smirks a bit as the two walk away to do battle. Tsukasa glares, following them as Yusuke and Dragonic follow. Shinji hums and decides to follow Ren too, wanting to know what he knows. The trio follows as Kamada suddenly stops at a glass window mirror downstairs and walks inside. Yusuke drops his jaw, uttering out loudly, they enter inside the mirror? Tsukasa and Dragonic gaze at him, both rolling their eyes. Tsukasa approaches the mirror, studying it. Could this be the ability these riders have in this world? Dragonic, grinning, pops behind him as he raises his right claw up. Let me give you a push. Dragonic declares, pushing Tsukasa right into the mirror as he gasps out in shock. Whoa! Tsukasa falls and enters inside the mirror, coming out on the other in the same place. Yusuke just had this face of shock, rushing over to the mirror to see Tsukasa on the other side. He taps on it and the window is just a regular window. This is all so weird. Neat, right? Tsukasa blinks, turning to see Dragonic next to him, still grinning. He hums, looking around, and spots a sign that had its writing in reverse. He now gets where he was saying. So this is the mirror world. Dragonic nods, explaining it to him. As Decade, you have the power to adapt to any world, thus you have the ability to enter the mirror world. Tsukasa is rather impressed. He can adapt to any environment. He smirks, finding it ironic and perfect for him. The dragon then recalls what they might face and orders him. Though transform now. Tsukasa is just saying while placing the decadriver around his waist, but then he stops. He eyes the dragon, realizing where they were, and asks, bewildered. Wait, then how are you here? Dragonic eyes him and smirks, responding. Peef, please. Tsukasa rolls his eyes, annoyed. Realizing by now that Dragonic is as cryptic as impossible to do stuff with no explanation. He should stop getting surprised by, so you're defending that girl then? Tsukasa's thoughts are interrupted as he and Dragonic turn to see Kamada, also present in the mirror world. Sub-editor San then? Tsukasa asks, taunting while pointing his finger at him. The older man frowns at his foolish nature and simply says, I respect your loyalty for your client, but I can't allow the death of my colleague be in vain. He then pulls out a blue Advent deck box to Tsukasa's slight surprise, figuring out how he got here. A belt manifests around the older man as he declares, Henshin. Kamada slides the box into the center empty slot as his body is wrapped in mirror reflections, immediately transforming into the blue shark theme Kamen Rider Abyss. Oh, you're a rider too, huh? Small world. Tsukasa responds, pulling out the decade card in front of him. He taps it twice before shouting, sliding the card into the card inserter of the Decadriver. Henshin. He pushes the handles as the belt glows. Kamen Ride. The Decadriver begins announcing as Tsukasa transforms into Decade, wiping his hands for battle. Decade. Decade comes charging and engages Abyss in battle. Yusuke watches from his end and knows he has to help his friend. Yosh. My turn. Yusuke declares with a small smile, placing his hands on both sides of his waist. The Arkle manifests around his waist as he performs a battle pose and shouts, Henshin. Yusuke glows and transforms into Kuga. He now runs towards the mirror and instead of entering the mirror world like Decade, Kuga hits himself and cracks the mirror, partly broken from the impact. Dragonic sees this on his end and face palms before telling him, Idiot, I said only Tsukasa-kun could enter the mirror world. And now we can't leave here the same way we enter. Kuga grunts, rubbing his head and apologizes. My bad. Dragonic sighs and then notices as mirror monsters come into the real world. He might have been too harsh telling the rider. Actually, not really. Mirror monsters, deal with them, Yusuke-kun. Alright, Kuga declares, giving him a thumbs up and charges at the monsters. Dragonic sighs, sweat dropping, looking back at Decade, who is suddenly fighting Kamen Rider Emperor. The dragon startles, looking around, and that Abyss seems to have disappeared. He hums, rubbing his chin, puzzled. Why? Final attack ride. Dunking his final attack card as he kicks Emperor back, Decade leaps upward as the holographic cards manifest in a row towards Emperor. The rider comes downward with a kick, traveling through each card almost light speed as he kicks through Emperor and explodes. Decade wipes his hands together, proclaiming, Easy. Dragonic rolls his eyes as that was just the easier rider of this world. The two then hear fighting and check it out, finding Kamen Rider Ryuki and Knight engage in a so-so fight. Dragonic hums, able to tell both Shinji and Ren don't wish to hurt the other due to their bond. Tsukasa, however, doesn't care as he approaches them. Mind if I join in? Decade calls out to both riders, who turn facing the new rider. Decade eyes Knight and taunts him. You must not like your former boss, huh? Hey! Ryuki tries to call out, wanting to fight Knight alone, but said rider gets in his way, gazing at Decade. Since we're riders, guess there's only one thing to do. Knight proclaims, holding forward his sword. Abyss watches from afar, humorous to see this. Decade pulls out the Kiva card, thinking of Wataru, and scoffs as he'll show off how to really use the powers of Kiva better than the kid. He slides the card into the belt. Kamen Ride. The Decadriver announces as Decade pushes the handles as he transforms into Kamen Rider Kiva. Kiva. Both Ryuki and Knight were surprised by this. Decade takes the moment to admire the transformation, further taunting Knight. A bat for a bat, right? Knight grunts and comes charging at him, with Decade Kiva grabbing and tossing him away. Ryuki watches, still taken back that Decade could change forms. Their fight moves into an underground parking lot, with both riders fighting seemingly evenly. Knight slashes him as sparks fly out of Decade Kiva, but he brushes it off, proceeding to kick Knight while now evading his sword swings after wiping his hands together. Knight proceeds in demanding if this Decade is really a defense attorney, a common rider, further demanding as he has no idea what kind of rider he is, all while attacking him. Decade. Most defensive but more like toying with his opponent, simply responds carefree while gripping on Knight's arm. Oh really? Well, I know about you guys. Pulling out a form ride card. Decade kicks Knight back as he slides the card in the Decadriver, pushing the handles. Form ride. The Decadriver proclaims as Kiva begins to change form. Kiva Garuru. Wiping his hands. Decade Kiva changes into the sword blue Kiva form. Swiping the backside of the sword with his other hand, Decade comes charging and swings multiple strikes across a stunned Knight, sparks flying around. Knight is backed away grunting as Decade turns his back on his enemy, bored already with this form. He pulls out another form ride card and slides it into the belt. Form ride. The Decadriver declares as Kiva changes forms once more. Kiva Daga. Decade Kiva now turns into the hammer purple Kiva form while Knight comes charging in. In the last second, Decade twirls and intercepts the sword strike before slamming the punch-ended hammer across Knight. The pummeling doesn't stop with Decade massively overpowering Knight before he leaps away. Pulling out a vent card from his sword. Trick vent. The voice from the sword proclaims as multiple copies of Knight appear. Decade is aware the odds are against him. Pulling out another form ride card and he dunks it. Form ride. The Decadriver announces as he pushes the handles and transforms. Kiva Basshaa. Decade changes into the gun green Kiva form. He tries to fire a shot but the Knight clones surround him and they all strike him one at a time so hard before Decade Kiva is tossed back, reverted out of Kiva form. Getting on one knee unaffected. Decade declares pulling a card. I've got one of those too. He immediately slides the card into the card inserter. Attack ride. The Decadriver speaks up as Decade now multiples too. Illusion. Knight startles as each of the Decade copies had the ride Booker in either sword or blaster forms. The fight resumes with Decade and his clones easily overpowered Knight's copies without any hassle. The copies vanished as Knight gasps on the ground, one need. Decade scoffs as Ryuki arrives. That's what you get, Ren, for betraying us. Ryuki calls him off, knowing he must be stopped. Chuckling at that, Decade however questions the naive rider. Did he? Ryuki startles facing him. Decade doesn't say much, eyeing Knight and turns his back on him. I'm already bored. It's been fun, Decade declares as he starts walking away. Knight is shocked by this and tries calling him back. Wait. But before Decade could react, all three riders are suddenly blasted by sharp needle-like attacks, striking them as sparks fly out. All three fell back and Decade grunts facing Abyss with his shark mirror monster. It's a shame you'll die here, devil. Abyss declares with a slight evil laugh. Decade stares at Abyss. Now more convinced of his theory. The mirror monster prepares to attack again but Dragonic suddenly appears in front of him and swings his tail, smacking the monster into a wall. It soon vanishes as Abyss grunts with the dragon waving with a grin. Then you will all vanish. Abyss declares as he leaps into a mirror and breaks it. Decade tries to pursue him until missiles hit next to them, sending them back. It is Kamen Rider Zolda, taking aim with his massive blaster weapon with his mirror monster taking aim. Decade doesn't like these odds. Zolda with his Advent monster prepare to fire their massive attack at the group of Decade, Dragonic and the other two riders. Ryuki and Knight take a run to escape as Decade prepares to fight the rider but Dragonic has a better idea. Okay, time to use a secret technique I learned from a family of legends. Dragonic reveals tapping his fedora down, smirking like a badass. Decade ignores that, thinking for a moment what this so-called technique could be. Continue fighting or forming a plan? Decade questions to get his answer as Dragonic has left his side and he's running for his life. Roaring loudly while waving his arms up and down like he was jogging. Run away. Decade watches leaning his head to the side, asking startled. Seriously? He turns as Zolda prepares to unleash his massive attack and sighs. Decade starts running like an idiot following Dragonic getting to a mirror. The two leap as Zolda unleashes his multiple missiles at them. They leap through the mirror just as the missiles explode upon them, destroying the mirror. Kuga has just defeated the mirror monsters as he hears a thud. He turns to see Dragonic and Tsukasa untransformed on the ground, panting heavily. Worked out well, Dragonic declares with a grin while winking at Tsukasa, who groans annoyed, uttering out peeved. Shut up, Natsumi groans inside her cell room. Just a bed. A toilet, not even a girl's one, and a small window outside to mock her entrapment. Sigh. Natsumi sighs, hating her situation. Why did this have to happen to her? Hopefully Tsukasa will come through. No, he will. As much as egoist and self-interested he is, Tsukasa is a good person. He won't. Decade will fail you. Natsumi startles looking forward and panics to see Narutaki, facing directly at her within the room. She gets up calmly. Looking around and how the heck, where did he come from? You're Narutaki-san? She questions, remembering his name. He nods, tapping his hat. She frowns, puzzled about something, so she asks him, "Why do you hate Tsukasa-kun so much?" Narutaki just glares at her assumption and politely corrects her. Hate is just one word for how much I despise Decade. Natsumi blinks, still not getting it. Much. He turns and begins to tell her firmly. But as you know, he is a destroyer. He will destroy everything he touches, including you. I don't believe you. Narutaki turns to see Natsumi's strong face. Even if Tsukasa is called a devil or a destroyer, she won't give up on him. I believe in Tsukasa-kun. I can't prove he is a destroyer, but he is a hero. He will save me and fix this world's problem. Natsumi declares, believing in him. Narutaki and could only see a foolish girl that's placing her trust on someone she shouldn't. Just like someone else he knew. You're as naive like your grandfather. Narutaki proclaims to Natsumi's shock. Does he know her grandfather? Before she could ask him anything, Narutaki was gone. She sweats, taken back. If he's a ghost, or then you will understand pain when Decade destroys everything else you love. Natsumi gasps, hearing the echoing voice of Narutaki before vanishing. Completely. Natsumi is alone again, worrying for Tsukasa if that man really is trying to kill him. Absol. She blinks, walking over to the window and peeks out, seeing Absol barking out to her. Absol? Natsumi utters, surprised she could find her. Her scent must be something else. She eyes the dog Mon whining, sad for her. Natsumi smiles when she comes to see her, but she's still worried for Tsukasa. Absol, please help Tsukasa-kun while I'm here. Please help him. Natsumi pleads for the white-furred Mon to help Tsukasa. Absol groans, a bit hesitant, but nods to her wishes. She soon runs off to track down Tsukasa. Natsumi sighs, alone again, but still hopeful, knowing Tsukasa isn't a monster or a destroyer. She believes in him. After that bust, Tsukasa along with Yusuke and Shinji went to where Ren lives and found old articles of past projects he and Shinji had done. Shinji saddens a bit, expressing how different those times were, happy times until Ren wanted to pursue his own goals alone. Tsukasa checks his watch, knowing time is running out on Natsumi. If he doesn't get her out of this mess, she'll die. And just as time is running out, Dragonic flies off to track down where Ren went. We're running out of time. Yusuke expresses concern for Natsumi too. Shinji had enough to think about proclaiming who is the murderer. It has to be Ren-san. It just makes the most sense. Tsukasa didn't say a word, just thinking. Yusuke eyes him, waiting for him to say something but doesn't. He frowns, speaking his thoughts. I don't think he did. Shinji eyes him while Tsukasa smirks. He eyes him and questions him. Why you think so, Watson? Yusuke staggers, annoyed. Still not sure what it means, but he does tell him his opinion. Someone who shows love with his writing and has this much respect towards his friend is incapable of hurting that same friend. I know so. He eyes Shinji knowing he doesn't believe in his friend, but friendship isn't forgotten and it can be restored. I don't believe Ren did it. I'm sure of it. Yusuke expresses believing in that ideal. Tsukasa smirks, just commenting. Naive idiot. Yusuke staggers again, gazing at Tsukasa. He eyes him and tells him cocky-like, I already know who did it, but we need to find Ren first, as he too is affected like Natsumi. Yusuke blinks, as does Shinji. Tsukasa eyes Shinji and tells him serious, supporting his idiotic friend's logic. As much as you don't believe this, Ren respects his dearest friend more than anyone. That's why he's willing to let you finish him off. Shinji doesn't think of it at first, but that is why Ren didn't want to fight him. Regardless, they split off to find Ren or find Dragonic to find Ren. Though Yusuke stick beside Tsukasa, surprised he believes that Ren is innocent too. Tsukasa-san. Tsukasa turns, eyeing Yusuke, and oddly smiles, telling him, I'm surprised you don't think Ren is the murderer. Tsukasa eyes him and scoffs. Not surprised he asked him such an obvious question. He might have if he too isn't carrying luggage of his own regrets. He did notice that Ren kept those memories of his and Shinji's past work, showing they meant a lot to him. I just see what others don't see. Someone held back by one past's mistakes, wishing to fix them. Tsukasa states with a small smirk on his face, thinking of Seo and how stupid he was. If he just ignored her wishes, maybe, just maybe, she would be alive. He chuckles a bit, laughing as he adds with his hands in his pockets, kinda pathetic, right? Yusuke frowns now, getting a bit of the kind of person Tsukasa is. But before he could say anything, the wall behind them breaks and a massive cobra mecha-like mirror monster emerges, coming at Tsukasa with its fangs. The two startle, but Tsukasa kicks Yusuke back and just barely dodges the launching attack of the cobra. He falls backwards, rolling. Tsukasa-san! Yusuke shouts in horror, rushing to his aid. The cobra monster quickly smacks Yusuke with its tail, sending him back and knocking him out. It now comes charging at Tsukasa, trying to get up. He wouldn't make it, but then nothing happened. He blinks, turning, and sees that the massive mecha-like cobra is stopped by Absol and her detect, blocking the mirror monster's attack. Absol barks using Psycho Cut and thrusts the monster back. Tsukasa oddly smirks at this and praises her, petting her horn. Nice timing, Mutt. Absol eyes him and smirks, biting into his leg for the Mutt comment. Tsukasa gasps out, kicking it off his bitten leg, yelling at her, Why bite me again? Absol grins again, but then she growls, pointing forward. Tsukasa turns as the cobra slitters back to its master. It is Kamen Rider Uha, twirling his back neck as he breathes almost relaxed. Tsukasa stands up, ignoring the bitten leg, and teases the rider, pointing at him. You know pet cobras kill, right? I'm vexed. Killing is my hobby. Uha just responds, pulling out his cane-like weapon. Absol barks angrily as her eyes glow. Tsukasa stands up, placing the Decadriver around his waist as he pulls his Decade Rider card. She's vexed too. Henshin, Tsukasa declares, sliding the card into the belt and pushes its handles. Kamen Ride. Decade. The belt announces as Tsukasa transforms into Decade. He then pulls out the Kuga card and dunks it, pushing the handles. Kamen Ride. Kuga. Decade transforms into Kuga and comes charging at Uha. The two engage in a fight, but Decade Kuga has a stronger advantage with his superior physical strength, slamming the purple rider onto a wall. Grunting, Uha pulls out a vent card and slides it into the card inserter of his staff. Final vent. The voice of the staff proclaims as Uha hops on the cobra, slithering towards Decade. The cobra twirls its tail, smacking Decade back hard as the cobra tosses its master forward at the enemy. Decade barely had time to react, reaching out a card and using it without looking at it. Once he realizes what the card was, Decade has a plan as Uha comes kicking at Decade until his target seemingly vanishes. Uha lands confused until he's suddenly kicked by a Firefoot, sending him flying back hard. It's soon revealed to be Decade Kuga, wiping his hands cocky like, "Well, what you know, I can use invisible." Decade states, rather surprised that it worked. Dragonic soon arrives next to him and questions him. "You didn't realize you could use your attack ride cards with your rider forms?" Decade turns to Dragonic and sighs, upsetting. "A certain purple-scaled winged rice-eating dragon forgot to tell me I could," he states, loudly annoyed. Dragonic grins, correcting him. "Correction, Watson. I didn't tell you." Decade scoffs, not believing he thinks he's a better Sherlock than himself. Uha grunts, getting up and starts laughing like a madman, declaring to the lizard now arriving, "Don't get in my way, roadkill." Snapping, Dragonic turns as his eyes glow furious. "You first." Opening his fangs, Dragonic roars, gathering fiery red flames in his mouth. Drago non-burst. He unleashes a massive energy burst of red flames as they slowly turn purple, heating up hotter. The attack hits Uha, screaming as he's sent flying and into a portal manifesting behind him. Dragonic stops his flames and blows the last piece of it away. "Could have done that too," Decade tells him as he changes back to Tsukasa, crossing his arms. Dragonic eyes him, doubtful he could. "Absol." The two turn as Absol joins them and growls, facing forward. The two face forward and see three riders emerging out of the mirrors. Kamen Rider Rhino. Verde and Tiger now? Dragonic mutters, questionable and irritated. Tsukasa grunts, pulling out the Decade card again, but before he could transform, something flies by and smacks the riders. "Hold it right there, guys." It was Kavat swooping and smacking them back. Dragonic hums, with Tsukasa uttering out, surprised, "That bat? Why is he, Tsukasa-kun?" "I'll deal with them." A voice speaks up. Tsukasa turns and sees who it was, the struggling violinist. He soon realizes who this person was, thinking back on the violin and the piece he played. "So you're..." The young man smiles, nodding, and greets him. "Wataru Kuranai. Thank you for helping my AR self." Tsukasa scoffs, figuring as much. He then asks him the obvious. "So you were waiting to fight me then?" Wataru blushes, a bit embarrassed about that, and admits to himself, "I was, but I guess us riders have our own uncontrollable need to help others. My father was like that, well, other than playing the world with his music." Tsukasa just chuckles a bit at his naive nature, but he accepts it. "Go. I got this." Wataru tells him, willing to fight these riders so Tsukasa can help his friend. He raises his hand, shouting, "Kavat." The bat responds, flying back to his aid. "Let's do it, Wataru," Kavat declares as he lands on Wataru's hand, and then he has the bat bite his other hand. Chains manifest, wrapping around Wataru's waist before becoming the Kavat belt. Fankare marks form under Wataru's checks and bottom face as he declares serious. Henshin. He places Kavat onto the center of the belt, transforming him in a mirror-like reflection as Kamen Rider Kiva. Tsukasa, Dragonic, and Absol watch as Kiva takes on his battle pose and comes charging at the three enemy riders, engaging them. They watch as Kiva engages the three riders, beating them down while switching into his different forms in the process. Tsukasa snarls a bit as it seems he has a long way before he could truly be better in using Kiva's powers after this, almost like this Wataru is still holding back. Dragonic is also impressed but snaps out as they have to reach Shinji and Ren. "Tsukasa," he calls out as the young man also snaps out and answers. "I know. Absol." Absol barks as she sniffs and catches a scent. She runs for it as the other two follow her. Absol leads them to finding Shinji with Ren, panting heavily on one knee. He explains he had to fight Kamen Rider Odin, showing them a special vent card. The time vent. With it, we can travel back in time to prevent Reiko's death. Ren explains, panting heavily. Shinji is startled by this and questions him. "Ren-san, was this your plan?" Tsukasa smirks, proclaiming as he stares at Ren. "Now I get the gist. This was your plan from the start." Ren nods, frowning. not wishing to show it, but Reiko's death has affected him and made him realize his own prideful mistake. I didn't want to give up on the idea that if I didn't pursue my own wishes, then we would have continued being the best team. Ren expresses his past mistakes and he needs to make it up for the friend he hurt. Shinji eyes him taken back by this, muttering out saddened, "Ren-san." Shinji realized his own mistake, putting the blame on him. He nods, eyeing his friend, and holds his hand. "Ren-san, I think we can achieve both our wishes together." Shinji asks him with a small smile. Ren eyes his hand and slowly smiles, accepting his hand as he's pulled back on his feet. Dragonic smiles, happy to see friends reunited, with Tsukasa scoffs, finding it corny. Ren hands the time vent to Shinji and pleads for him to do the honors. "Shinji, use the card to change everything." Shinji hesitates, eyeing the card until Tsukasa snatches and proclaims with a small smirk, "Let me use it." Before Shinji could protest, Tsukasa slides the time vent card into the decadriver and it starts to react strangely. Dragonic watches, actually curious if it could work, as Tsukasa pushes the handles forward. "Attack ride," the decadriver announces as the group stops and rewinds, everything and everyone but Tsukasa, Dragonic, Absol, Shinji and Ren going backwards as time and space swirls. Time vent. Before they knew it, time resets back an hour before the events of the death of Reiko Momoi and Natsumi's arrest. Absol blinks, extremely uneasy as she barks. "Absol, relax, mutt. We're at the right time." Tsukasa tells her, checking his watch, and indeed it was an hour before this whole mess began. He then checks his belt and pulls out the time vent card. Tsukasa then tosses the card back to Ren, not going to need it anymore, as he orders him and Shinji, "You two go into the conference room to save your boss. I'll deal with our murderer." The two nod, planning to do so anyway. A flat Absol begins to bark, wanting to help find the murderer, but Tsukasa protests and orders her, "I got this. Go to Natsumi-kan too. You two, dragon." Absol eyes him upset but ultimately nods. Dragonic scoffs, adjusting his fedora hat down. Tsukasa then heads off to find the one behind this. After confirming who it was, it's only obvious where he could be. Just close to the bottom level, staring at the window conference room, Kamada watches and waits as Reiko sits next to the window. Seeing his chance with a smirk, he summons his shark mirror monster to kill her from long range, until the monster is shot down by multiple energy blasts before vanishing. "What?" Kamada utters in shock as another voice calls out. "Right on cue, huh?" The older man turns and there he stares at Tsukasa approaching while twirling the gunform ride booker before changing it back to its regular form while putting it back on his side waist. "You," he utters out in shock, almost puzzled how he is here. Tsukasa, smirking, starts saying while posing one hand over his chin, "Oh, I'm surprised. That means you knew who I was before we met." The old man glares in shock, simply demanding, "How did you know that?" Tsukasa, not answering his question, instead points his finger to the window of the conference as the target is pulled away by Shinji in the room, arriving just in time with Ren. "I realized there was no logical way to explain Reiko's death, well, except there was one. A rider murdered her," Tsukasa proclaims, concluding his detective works on who killed the editor-journalist had to be watching her from outside, but not just anyone but a common rider who can enter the mirror world or use the mirror world to launch an attack. Only someone who can enter the mirror world could have killed her, and not just anyone but someone with long range. He then recalls his suspects and their alibis, all except for one pointing his finger at Kamada. "Shinji said she was in her office and Ren didn't know, but you knew where she was before any of us said where she died." Tsukasa theorizes already got the vibe he knew more than what he was leading. Of course, only one part of the mystery he still doesn't get, asking said criminal, "I just have one question for you." Kamada starts chuckling, figuring as much, so he answers, "So you want to know why I want to kill her? Very well, Tsukasa, however, wags his index finger at him and says, I know why you wanted to kill Reiko. She had the means to shut down the rider battles. She didn't like how it removed the freedom of human right to defend themselves over for the entertainment of others for the rider battles. He then adds, pointing his finger right back at the man who would lose everything with the rider battles gone. And if the battles ended, it would harm your articles on them. Which is why you became Kamen Rider Abyss, to make sure the battles would continue. No? Kamada is taken back that he figured out his entire plan, but he still didn't get one thing now. If you knew what was my motive, then why ask? He questions him, not getting why he wanted to know his plan. Tsukasa, however, slowly curves his lips into a frown. You misunderstand, Tsukasa begins to say as he starts walking up to him, revealing his actual question. My question is why framed Natsumi? Kamada raises an eyebrow, simply questioning that. What does it matter? Now right up to him. Tsukasa snaps and punches the man across the face so hard it knocks him off his feet and onto the ground hard. Leaning down, Tsukasa grips Kamada by the collar and lifts him up one-handed. Your mistake was pissing me off. Tsukasa threatens him with the coldest glare he could give a human being. Destroyer, devil. Tsukasa can accept those names right now as he punches Kamada across the face again, causing the man to bleed from his mouth. Pulling him up again. Tsukasa gut punches Kamada as he yells as he kicks him across the gut. You could have picked anyone else, but you had to target my friend. Kamada gasps out blood from his mouth as Tsukasa upper punches him back onto the ground. You had the nerve to put the blame on Natsumi-kan, and that was your mistake. Tsukasa calls him off, wiping his hands from the dirt of this scum. Kamada, lifting himself hurt, holds up the Abyss Advent box forward to a window as the belt manifests around his waist. Henshin, he shouts, sliding the box into his belt as he starts to glow. As he transforms, his future self, appearing as a spirit through a temporary rift in time, is absorbed inside of the past self, becoming one. Soon he turns into Abyss and comes at Tsukasa only for him to sidestep back and stomp his foot back. With such a hefty kick, it pushes the transformed rider backwards. Abyss startles getting up only to get a gut punch by Tsukasa as he grabs his helmet head and roundhouse kicks him back. How are you able keeping up with me without transforming? Abyss demands angrily and in agony by this humiliation. Once more wiping his hands, Tsukasa tells him with a dark glare. I told you already, you pissed me off. Abyss breathes heavily, literally shaking, staring deep at Tsukasa's furious eyes. Such eyes that leave fear into any being. He panics, sliding a vent card into his inserter. Advent vent. The weapon speaks as the shark mirror monster reappears and tosses Tsukasa back. It then comes charging at him until a fireball hits it, causing the monster to move around to put it out. Dragonic hovers over Tsukasa, taunting the young man with a smirk. Careful there, Tsukasa-kun, you could have been shark food. Tsukasa just scoffs with a small smirk, standing up. Tsukasa-san. Tsukasa turns to see Shinji arriving on the scene. He looks in shock at Abyss, and he's left shocked that it was him behind all of this. He almost staggers to think he blamed Ren for Reiko's death while all this time it was him. The sub-editor of their job. Getting frustrated, Shinji shouts at him demandingly. Why, Kamada-san? You were about to kill Reiko-san. Put the blame on Natsumi and at worst accuse Ren to be the murderer. Why? Abyss, laughing, begins saying that fate demands the strong to rule over the weak and that one fights for oneself. Just thinking of those words, remembering Saya, Tsukasa heard enough of his crap. Sometimes we fight for ourselves using these hands. Tsukasa begins to say, admitting there is some truth to Abyss' words. However, he raises his right hand and protests squeezing that same hand. But with the same hands we can also grasp another's hand. Shinji eyes him, looking at his hand and admitting it, his own past desire to hurt Ren to his want to restore the bond they now have. When that happens we may be weak, even foolish, but we are not alone. Tsukasa declares it serious. Dragonic smiles to hear him use those same corny but truthful words. Right now. We are a team, Shinji proclaims, pulling out the Ryuki advent box and shows it to the reflection of a broken mirror as the belt manifests around his waist. Tsukasa smirks, pulling out the Decadriver and straps it around his waist. Let's go then, he proclaims, pulling out the Decade card, tapping it. Henshin, the two shout as Shinji slides the deck box and transforms into Ryuki as Tsukasa slides the card into the card inserted and pushes the handles. Kamen ride. Decade, the Decadriver declares as Tsukasa transforms into Decade, wiping his hands. The two riders engage Abyss with Ryuki fighting the shark mirror monster as Decade slashes Abyss with the Ride Booker sword form. The last swing sends Abyss back with sparks flying out. Bastard. Who are you? Abyss demands angrily, with Decade simply replying, pointing his left hand at him. Just a passing through common rider. Remember that. Abyss grunts furiously, not believing he left him alive than to kill him when he had the chance. Damn you. I should have gotten rid of you back then. He states, cursing at his own sense of entertainment for more rider battles. Decade, however, sniggers a bit before asking him in a teasing tone. Why? Narutaki warned you? Abyss staggers in shock as Decade then says, pointing the Ride Booker in blaster form. Your other mistake was also calling me a devil. He fires multiple shots, pushing Abyss back as Ryuki uses the shoot vent fire blast to him onto his mirror monster. Placing the Ride Booker on his side waist, Decade declares with Ryuki on his side. Let's finish this, Shinji. Right, Ryuki responds, determined to finally end this injustice. In that moment 3 cards pop out from the Ride Booker, which Decade catches them all, eyeing them to be Ryuki cards. Snickering a bit, Decade dunks the perfect card into the card inserter of the Decadriver to settle this. Final form ride. The belt begins declaring as Decade pushes the handles forward. This might tickle a bit. Decade declares as he pulls Ryuki towards him and reaches onto his back as the guard vents manifest on both his arm sides. Ryuki gasps in surprise and suddenly starts transforming into the mirror monster, Drag Raider, while the Decadriver announces, Ryuki Dragredder. This shocks Abyss as the massive dragon unleashes a powerful fireball at the shark mirror monster, destroying it instantly. Decade snickers, pulling and tapping the final attack ride twice before tossing it into his belt, pushing the handles once more. Final attack ride. The Decadriver declares as Decade poses and jumps upward, all while the Drag Raider circles around Decade, mimicking Ryuki's final advent rider kick. Up high. Decade comes down at Abyss with a kick while Drag Raider breathes a powerful flame, engulfing the rider and strikes Abyss directly. The kick explodes and flames spread around. Ryuki. Decade lands on the ground, standing up while wiping off his hands as Drag Raider reverts back to Ryuki and drops onto the ground, grunting. Nice job. Dragonic congratulates both riders with a grin. Decade eyes him and scoffs a bit, until the smoke of the attack clears up and surprises them. What the Decade utters as emerging from the smoke is Kamada with his Abyss advent box destroyed, all while he bleeds out some kind of green liquid as blood, not human. He survived? Ryuki utters out, surprised, not possible. Decade and Dragonic ignore that and are more disturbed by the green liquid coming out of him. That liquid, Decade mutters almost like he knows this, and Dragonic even tells him. That's undead blood. This leaves Decade honestly taken back, questioning it. Undead? But that's from the world of Blade? Dragonic nods firmly. Decade looks back at that man and demands, annoyed. What the hell are you then? Just the taste of your ultimately defeat. Decade. A voice speaks up as an aurora curtain appears and Narutaki steps out, gazing at the magenta-colored rider. Narutaki. Decade utters angrily. No doubt aware this is the reason Natsumi was accused. All of this was your trap for me. Dragonic growls, also assuming that it was him, and calls him off angrily. You put Natsumi-chan in such an inhuman position. I'll do whatever it takes to get rid of the one being who must die. Narutaki declares willing to do anything for his mission. He then adds, glaring at Decade. Remember, this is your fault, Decade. Decade scoffs at his blaming game and taunts him, pointing his finger at him. Then I better stop you. No? We shall see. Narutaki simply responds, having plenty of plans to get rid of him. However, Dragonic snaps and roars angrily. Like right now, Dragonic flies right at him like a missile, but Narutaki manifests another Aurora curtain, swallowing up both himself and Kamada away. The dragon misses them, stopping in front of where they were, growling mad. Damn it! Decade walks up as he changes back. Tsukasa could tell Dragonic is furious and sighs. He pets his hat and says, "Another time, Dragonic." Dragonic groans but nods. Next time they'll stop him. Single quote ellipsis. What even happened? Shinji asks, extremely puzzled on what even happened. Tsukasa didn't bother explaining, walking away with Dragonic flying beside him. Shinji blinks and just follows after them. The three return back to the journalist building to see Ren on the ground. Ren-san! Shinji shouts of uneasiness, running to his aid. Tsukasa looks around, not seeing anyone, though someone was watching Tsukasa instead, smirking. Ren wakes up grunting and immediately checks. Both his advent book and the time vent card were gone. Sorry, I got held back by someone who took the time vent and the night advent box. He explains, upset that he let this even happen. It all happened so fast, with Ren trying to catch up to Shinji but was stopped by a strange man wearing a hat, simply demanding to hand over the night advent box and the other treasure. He tried to fight him, but this man just beat him with something, hitting his back, knocking him out. Next thing he knew, Shinji was waking him up and his stuff was gone. Tsukasa stares puzzled, simply asking, who would be able to do that? Ren frowns, not sure himself. Whoever he was strong for a normal guy. It doesn't matter, I'm glad you're okay, Ren-san. Shinji, however, expresses happiness that his friend is okay. Ren oddly smiles as the two hold the other, ultimately friends again. Tsukasa sees this and smiles a little, holding his camera, and takes the shot. A photo to symbolize friendship that surpasses the rules of the world. I was framed for what? Natsumi shouts in horror at the stories Tsukasa and Dragonic were telling them before and after the time reset. Natsumi is just baffled, not remembering a thing. Yusuke also couldn't recall any of that. Dragonic figures as much as time resetting does that, depending of course on the reset. Tsukasa doesn't care if they don't recall, just telling her, relax. It's all fixed. You're fine, we all are. Now dinner? Natsumi narrows her eyes, peeved, and immediately strikes Tsukasa's neck with the laughing pressure point, causing him to immediately laugh loudly and uncontrollably. Dragonic smirks, as did Absol. Things back to normal. Wonder where this Kamada went? Yusuke asks, really confused what he and Narutaki might be up to. Tsukasa, however, after calming down from his laughter, already had an idea, eyeing the purple dragon, having the same idea in mind. I have a feeling where. Dragonic, Tsukasa states as the purple dragon nods in agreement. He flies up to the rope and declares with a smirk, to the next world then. He pulls down on it as the house starts shaking, teleporting into the next world. Tsukasa, alone in his thoughts, is concerned about who took the night advent deck as well as the time vent card, and for what reason. Wishing this all to be a coincidence, but he has a feeling that's not going to happen. Hopefully this simple worry is nothing. End of part 6. Like and subscribe.